Hi, welcome to week 7, presentation 3. We've been talking about making decisions and decision-making processes for quite some time now. And now we're going to start talking a little bit about the differences between individual decision-making and group decision-making. The challenge, of course, is when do you use an individual to make a decision versus when do you want to use a team to make a decision. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. We'll talk a little bit about some failed examples of group decision-making, and we'll talk a little bit more about some ideas on how to make better decisions. So why would you want to give a decision-making opportunity to a group? What's the difference? Why not just give it to one individual? Surely they've got the best interest of the company at heart. They want to make the right decision, and oftentimes they can make a decision relatively quickly given the right resources. Well, there's a tough time for individuals to make decisions. So we want to take a look and see, why would groups be better? How can I make more effective decisions? And really, what is the value of taking a team and giving them the decision-making opportunity rather than an individual? Well, it's an opportunity to work through some complex decisions. You get different perspectives on the same situation. Rather than having individuals all spread out and maybe asking this individual over here, what do you think, and what do you think, and what do you think, you can get everybody together and have them come together and develop that aspect. Everybody gets the same information at the beginning. So instead of telling this person one set of information, and they ask specific questions, and this other person over here gets the information, but they ask a different set of questions, everybody coming together can get the same information and make a better decision because of all that information. It can integrate individual knowledge and skill sets. What one individual knows might contribute to what somebody else knows. One individual might have a better analytical ability, where another individual might have better research ability. It's flexible. You put the team together, you deploy them on the object, you can refocus them, and then you disband them, right? So you have the opportunity to add people to the team as you need, maybe go out and get some additional expertise and find out exactly what information is necessary to make a solid decision. It also increases commitment to the decision when the team has the opportunity to decide go, no go on a specific thing. And it fosters motivation to work through the decision. Sometimes a team that might seem to be stagnant can be given a task of making a decision on a critical element for the organization and the team, and they can oftentimes get more motivated as a result of working on that particular one. Teams can result in exceptional success. Many of you have probably seen Apollo 13, and there were some examples of the Apollo 13 Tiger teams working together to resolve problems. One of the problems was the problem with the CO2 cartridges, and how do we get the team together to evaluate that? Another one was the team working on finding additional power. So teams can come together and can result in some spectacular successes overall. But they can make some bad decisions as well, some very bad decisions. One example is the 1985 Coca-Cola flavor change. Coca-Cola decided they were losing too much market share to Pepsi-Cola and other drinks, and decided that the only way that they could make that come back was to change the flavor, which was a disaster. Nobody liked the flavor. They asked the wrong people about the flavor. They didn't use the correct data. They didn't consider the alternatives in that particular situation. So they made a very bad choice. Another example was the Bay of Pigs invasion that John F. Kennedy was the lead on for in 1963. We'll be talking more about that in a little bit. But that's a good example of a team making another bad decision. And another one was the Mars decision, when they were asked if they could use M&Ms in the movie. So Mars said, I don't think so. I think we're not going to let you use M&Ms in the movie to lure E.T. out of the closet. So who got the bid? Hershey and Reese's Pieces. Reese's Pieces, up until that point, was not very well known. But suddenly, it was in E.T. and it exploded onto the market. It was a huge marketing coup for Hershey's. So those decisions that were made by teams resulted in some pretty bad decisions overall. So the bigger question is, can decision makers make a better decision, or are two heads better than one? Well, they can be, right? There are some advantages to having more than one individual make a decision. You get those additional alternatives like we talked about earlier. You get more ideas. You get more opportunities to vet the different decisions as well. You get the additional knowledge that comes in of whether or not a situation has been tried before, or what kind of things could happen. You avoid traps. Why? Because you might have somebody assigned They could be the devil's advocate. They could say, well, yeah, if we go that direction, this is what might happen to us if we pursue this plan of action. It can improve acceptance of the decisions by everybody else. If you go to a larger organization and you say, hey, listen, I made the decision that this is what we're going to do, that's going to be approached and received much differently than if you said, we had a team look at it and the team came up with these particular responses and alternatives. You result in this synergy. One individual just can't have synergy. And synergy, of course, is more than one item coming together to create more than the sum of those individual parts. A good example is the use of synthetic oil in your cars. That's basically taking oil, regular oil, dead dinosaurs, and putting it together with polymers. Individually, they have oil, and that does okay, and the polymers do okay, but you put them together and it comes up with a much better product. On the other hand, there are some disadvantages. Those disadvantages, of course, are it takes more time to make a decision. Teams get together, there's discussions, there's ownership issues, there's agenda items, there's people can't make it to the meetings, they need to make a decision, so it takes much longer to make that particular decision than an individual would. One individual might dominate the discussion, particularly if it's the leader. If a leader is in a team and they say, this is what I think should happen, who's going to disagree? So a team of peers would be much better off than having a team of a leader and then the subordinates in that same team. Compromise often occurs. You might have an individual who has a great idea, but somebody else comes up with another idea, and you say, well, I like both of those, but we can't do both of them at the same time, so we have to compromise at some level. And of course, anytime there's a compromise, that means that there's at least one loser, and more often than not, more than that. And people are seen as having lost a part of their own decision. So compromise can be helpful, but remember that people are going to get their feelings hurt because their entire idea was accepted. There's extremes of risk and conservative decisions. One individual or group of people might say, I want to pursue this risky alternative, and another group might say, well, we need to be much safer than that. We don't want to go that far out on a limb, right? Because we want to make sure that we can recover if this decision goes bad. So there are decisions from that perspective as well. Team meetings waste a lot of time, right? You got to be able to manage those team meetings correctly. If you don't manage them right, people will come together for a meeting, and if they're not facilitated with a clear agenda in mind, we'll have an hour lost and nothing will have happened in that particular meeting. And there could be one dominating coalition. And a coalition, of course, is a group of people that get together with similar interests that try and drive an agenda to meet their own requirements or interests. So you got to keep that in mind as well. If you see a bunch of people getting together and talking about that, you have to be cautious of that as well. Polarization of groups. Once you start getting those differences of opinions and people start talking about them, people become entrenched and they start digging in more and finding more and more ways to get that confirmation bias of their own decision. So you got to watch out for that as well. There's a quick video here on groupthink and conformity I want you to watch, and I think you'll think it's pretty good. It's candid camera, but it provides some comic relief as well as a good example of conformity and what happens when people conform. Groupthink is one of those things that you would think from the name of it, it sounds like a great idea. A bunch of people get together, they come up with a good idea, and they've thought about it as a group. Well, the problem is it's the failure of a highly cohesive group to use critical thinking. And that's where the bad ideas come from. A group has time pressures. There's a need for conformity. You want to make sure that you don't rock the boat, so you don't raise your hand and say, well, I'm not sure that that's a good idea. The team members fail to critically evaluate the decision options. What other choices are there? People don't want to hear that. They want to move quickly to a decision. And ultimately, a bad decision by the team is made. So somebody needs to be aware of the challenges of groupthink in an organization or a team decision-making situation so that you don't get into that particular trap. Some of the signs of groupthink: group ability is overestimated, closed-minded, they might be resistant to outside information. We've done this before, we don't need anything else, we don't need your help, those kind of things. There's no outsiders in the group of the decision-making, and there's a lot of pressure to conform to the outside group, such as we've tried this before, people didn't like it because A, B, or C. So there's some challenges there for conformity pressures. The negative outcomes: limited attention paid to the information, There's a biased use of facts to support the decision. We only pick the facts that we want to use to support that decision, never mind everything else, right? And we don't look at alternative plans. The Bay of Pigs example is, as I mentioned earlier, is a good example of a groupthink problem. Take a look at that video, and you'll see a little bit more about what happened in that, and you'll be able to pick out the specific aspects of what the outcomes were of that particular problem for John F. Kennedy and his team. So the outcomes were there was a powerful leader influencing the group. John F. Kennedy, nobody wanted to go against him. It was a homogenous group of people who were like-minded. Nobody thought to ask anybody from the other party, well, what do you guys think? People, again, didn't want to rock the boat and be seen as somebody who's going to go against the boss. We didn't look at our additional options. That team looked at no options, and they did not come up with a plan B in the event that something comes up that we can't move forward with it. Always have an alternative plan, an alternate that you can fall back upon. So in summary, decision making, you can make decisions quickly, and you can use good solid data to help you make those decisions. Don't fall into the trap of just thinking that you have limited information. See if you can't ask for more information. Be aware of your decision making biases, such as your confirmation bias, your maybe a previous success that you thought you could be replicated in this one. So those decision-making biases need to be taken into account. Take a look at the environment outside that team and find out if there's anything that's going to give you some insight into the decisions that you're making. What happens if we do that? What's happened before? Are there any other groups that are having a similar problem that are trying to do this? Maybe another organization, another company has already tried this, and what were their outcomes? Trust yourself at the bottom line. Make a decision, stick with a decision unless you get irrefutable evidence that you should move a different direction.